Hello everyone, welcome to another F.L.O.E discussion session. Today's topic, the process of storytelling. We'll be interviewing an amazing playwright, producer, and novelist, Palesa Mazamisa. Join us and let's learn more about writing, and if you're an aspiring writer, this discussion will be great for you. Hello everyone, welcome to F.L.O.'s discussion session. Today we're going to be talking about a really fun and interesting topic, of storytelling. We've got an amazing author with us today. We're having a live discussion, so everyone's welcome to share in and to ask any questions they might have, any comments. All right, so let's welcome our guest, Palesa Mazamisa. Hi, Pali, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you so much for asking. So let's start with getting to know you a little bit better. Pali, would you like to tell us a little bit about where you come from?
So, bit of a complex question, but so originally South African, but raised in the Netherlands, and then raised in the Netherlands, but then I also lived in the US for almost 10 years. So where do I come from? It's, it really depends. Depends on the day. No, it depends on whose leadership in government is the most favorable at the time. But yes, I've lived in different places, cities, continents, and to be honest, I really feel I belong everywhere.
Oh, that's such a beautiful answer. I love that. Would you say living in so many different places helps to give you culture and more depth in your writing?
Yes, I think so, because I think what it allows one to do is to understand and see different perspectives. And also it helps with the imagination, because to imagine skies that are in a certain way. I'll give you an example. I noticed when I lived in the US, in the cities, you'd never see stars.
Yeah?
I only realized it when I went on a road trip and we were driving through Iowa, which is really rural, and they had open skies. And it's after living in the US for a few years, then I realized that, it's the first time that I'm actually noticing the stars.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it makes me think a lot about imagination. What is your concept of an understanding of things that may be basic and normal in one context, but completely foreign in another context?
That's
so I do think it's useful in writing to have the ability or to have that kind of exposure.
That is very true. I love that. I think you've got a lot of culture, especially I remember reading one of your books, A Day in August, it's called, right? Yes. Just telling Miriam and Fumani that was one of my best books from you, that the characters are really, really real and you gave such life to them. Can you tell us what inspired that book?
So, that story, so the reason it's called A Day in August, it was really in response to the Marikana massacre. And which really, it was quite devastating. It was sad. It was enraging that a country that has gone through our history to be faced with that kind of events in a modern day democracy. But anyway, so that was my response from a political perspective. But from an emotional perspective, I thought, here we are again with families and children who will lose fathers.
Yeah.
So it's about the cycles, the generations of children who grow up in households without fathers. And so I was thinking about, like, what does it do to your psychology? And it creates some kind of psychosis, I think, when your past is defined by such life events and also by such violence, and then also by constant death and people being taken away from you. And so that's why the character in that story is dealing with the mental issue, because I thought that's a nice way to, to get deeper into the emotions and the feelings that come with that kind of experience.
Yeah. So that sounds like a lot of depth there. And if our viewers would like to catch that book, where would they find it?
It's part of an anthology called Botsotso 17, and it's available at bookstores. There's also a website, botsotso.org.za, that I'll provide you with the details. And it's available at certain independent bookstores like Love Books in Melville. I can't think of some other ones, but I will also find out from the publisher where the books are available.
Thank you so much. All right, and you're quite versatile. Not only do you write for novels, you don't only write novels, you also write for stage plays.
I do, yes.
Right, and we just heard that you're busy with something right now. Would you like to share a bit about it?
Sure. On Monday, I will start rehearsals. I'm directing a play that I wrote. It's called Shoes and Coups, and it's political satire. And it's about a young girl who inherits the country. And but she really wants to be a fashion designer and design shoes. So she decides to get a corporation to take over. So it's set on one day during the negotiation process that goes wrong. So yeah, so I wrote it and I'll be directing it as well. And it will show at the Market Theatre from 21 November until 2 December.
That is so exciting. We wish you all the best with that, Palesa.
Yes, thank you.
Great, guys. Fumani says interesting. What are you saying is interesting, Fumani? The play that she's going to be taking a part in while writing. All right, so we've just been getting a few chats here. Miriam was saying hi, and I was just asking everyone if they have any questions. So we'll wait to see if anyone has any questions to ask you. I see that as well, that you've written for the O magazine. Yeah?
Yes, I have. So I don't think it's in print any longer, but I did write a few stories for them. And so writing for magazines, it's also a completely different experience, because there you have to write more for a particular audience.
Sure.
So as you know, with magazines, they've got target audiences. So it's always an interesting experience to write having a specific audience that you need to cater to.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's so cool, Vali. I mean, you've written on so many different platforms. What would you say was most interesting, or the one that gave you the most experience? Something that you would say was the most fun, or that you learned from the most?
There's a platform called This Is Africa, and it's an online platform. And then another online platform is Africa is a Country. And I enjoyed writing for those two because it was on issues that are close to my heart, related to Africa and social, political issues and economics. And so those were more opinion pieces.
That's so great.
And I liked writing opinion pieces because it allows you to deal with a single idea or thought and really flesh it out. So I would say those two were my favorite.
That is awesome, guys. Thank you so much, Bali. I've made notes of that, and I'd love to check those two platforms out. Right, so we've got
Okay.
a comment from Fumani. He says, the story of the is amazing. He says, Palesa, your profile is great. And he asks, how do you decide on the audience? Mean by that?
You know, I've been thinking about it because I think there are there's two main streams of writing. There's sort of your literary writing, and then you've got commercial writing. So your commercial writers write very much for a specific, for a wide audience, and it has to cater to certain aspects of that audience. So it's like a commercial film versus an art film. And so I thought about it, and I think I'm more of a literary writer. So I think my stories would appeal more to people who are interested in stories that are unusual, that don't follow a particular format.
Definitely.
And that are more about, insight into humanity, characters, and they're layered differently. So, so one thing I have to say is my audience, I like it to be universal. I write more for universal audience, but then I do like to set my stories within an African framework.
And how did you get to that style? Is it something that you found over the years, or is it something that you decided on?
I think it's something that I decided on because I don't have a typical South African background, so I couldn't really. I don't feel confident writing specifically in that context.
All right.
So I always like to bring a universal aspect to my stories. So I think that's why let me put it like telling local stories with universal appeal.
Okay, that's a very nice way to put it. I like that. All right, so we've got some questions from Fumani. He asks, what is your favorite book?
Well, my favorite book, there's so many, but I think one of the books that I really enjoyed is Heart of Redness by Zakes Nda.
Heart of Redness?
By Zakes Nda. Let me just type it. Heart of Redness. Redness by Zakes Nda. And what I liked, so Zakes Nda is a South African author, but he's based in the US. He's been living there for a long time. His family went into exile. He was in Lesotho, and from there they left the continent. I think they might have gone to the UK and then the US. But I think what I like about his stories is also they're local stories with a universal appeal.
Yeah.
And I think our interests are quite similar in that he likes to go into culture and roots, but he approaches it again from a universal perspective.
Yeah, wow.
And so I think, so this book really, it was just amazing. It's a bit historical. It goes into history. So it goes between history of Xhosa people, and then it switches to modern day, and then it integrates those stories. So that's really one of my favorite books.
I'm definitely going to be checking that one out. Fumani, I hope that answered your question. All right, so I have some...
She's asking, what about self-help blog writer?
Oh, yes, I was going to get to that, but you can answer that. Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, so, one thing I know with blogs is consistency, and you really have to stay on top of it. So if you decide that you want to write or publish once a week, then you have to stick to once a week. Or if you do it 3 times a week, then you must stick to 3 times a week. So it's very important then to be consistent, because if to build a following, your
Mm-hmm.
audience, they rely on that consistency. And then I also think because of the platform, it's screen. It's a different way of reading. I know a lot of people have said that it means that you have to be concise. So it's also very difficult in a sense. It's not as easy as it looks, because you have to get to the point quickly
Mm-hmm.
and effectively. So yeah, it's an interesting. I like blogs. I don't blog myself because of time constraints,
Yeah.
but um, I think it's a great platform to reach out, to get your name out there, and also to start creating the discipline of writing. Because again, people think writing is easy. You just you sit down and you start writing, but it's a discipline that involves your thought process. It's about how do you translate it in a way that is accessible and pleasant for readers. So there's a
True.
lot that goes into it.
That is so true. And Miriam just says, she says, true, it's challenging because of the time span of the audience's attention. Like you
Yeah,
said, you have to be
yeah.
concise and, make it
Mhm,
create of something that's fun to read, something that's informative, and something that's on
mhm.
the topic that you say you're writing about, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you guys. Such great questions. Miriam says concise and consistency. Yes. Miriam is actually
Yeah.
thinking of starting a blog herself. Yeah,
Mhm.
she is really going to be, enjoying this chat today.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, and
Mhm.
it reads like this. What literary pilgrimages have you gone on?
Oof, I haven't been on any, to be honest.
Mhm.
Um, just 'cause I haven't had the time, but I would like to go on some.
Yeah. What would your idea of a literary pilgrimage be?
Hmm. I'd love to be somewhere very quiet.
Mhm.
Um, either either the beach, a farm, or the woods. One of
Oh,
those three.
beautiful. Yeah.
And but just a quiet space where you are just away from the madness.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes when you're writing in the city, there's also this romantic concept of writing in a coffee shop, right? Which
True.
is fine, and I do it a lot. But I think it gives you a different energy. Um, and so also when you write, when you're in a writing space, you want to play with different energies. So sometimes it's okay to have all that energy, people around you, and having the ability to block yourself out of it, but still be in this space.
Hmm.
But then I would like to try out being in a completely silent space,
Yeah, that sounds good.
very isolated, and just to see what kind of energy does that bring to myself, getting into the writing space.
So have you ever written something in that kind of space?
Yes, I have actually.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Say that
I
that
was at my. It
uh-huh.
was at my friend's place. This is in the Netherlands, and she lives in a little village just outside of a city.
Mhm.
And it's a semi-farm. It's a farm-like space. So they've got cows and horses,
Mhm.
and they've got a little jungle set up as well. It's quite unique.
Yeah.
And so I finished the first draft of my novel there. And it was actually quite amazing because as I wrote the last word, there was
Uh-huh.
a thunderstorm.
Was that?
So there was thunder. So there
Oh,
was
wow.
lightning.
To like just
So I literally wrote the last word and it just went pow.
That's so synchronistic.
It was. So
Wow.
I have had that experience and I liked it. I enjoyed it.
That sounds
Yeah.
really beautiful. I can definitely
But
agree with you on that. In terms
yeah.
of being in a quiet space versus one that is populated with people, it is much more
Yeah.
conducive, and you're able to like hear your other voices versus hearing other people's voices and trying to fight it with your own.
Mm,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. But then I do also have to say, I was reading, what's the name? The author of Harry Potter.
Mm.
So she she was saying that she started writing in a restaurant and it is always busy and all of that. And she was saying that it's also important to learn to write in whatever space you are in.
Mm.
So it's also about discipline again, because
Yeah,
we would all love to have the ideal space and setting, but it doesn't always happen.
that's
So
very
it's also important to just take cognizance of your reality and then try to make it work within that reality. And when I read that comment, it stuck with me because at the time I was working on a piece,
mm-hmm.
and I was looking after my niece who was then a baby.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was maybe 6 months old,
Sure,
and
yeah.
then and so she refused to be put down. So even when she was going to sleep, she wanted you to hold her.
Yeah.
So so I had to make it work because this child would not let go. So I had to literally write with this baby on my on my chest.
Yeah. Oh, they're so needy.
So it can be done. It can be done.
Of course. I mean, Miriam is a mother. She knows very much as well about, I think her child is 8 months old. So yeah, sometimes we do like hands too much. And I mean, it's important, like you're saying, to be able to multitask and, to get things done with what you have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
All right, so let's move on to our next question that I have for you. Okay, so here's an interesting question. What was an early experience where you learned that language had power?
Hmm. Okay, so when I was young, and in the European context, and you read stories like Cinderella, and all these European fairy tales,
Yeah.
and they just never appealed to me. I couldn't get into them. I didn't really like them.
Mm.
So then my parents, they bought us, back in the day, remember we had the vinyls.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So they bought us that, and it had African children's stories. Well, it
Nice.
was specifically children's stories from West Africa. And so we'd sit, around the record player and listen. And to me, I think those stories were just so magical. They were completely different from what I knew. And I just loved and enjoyed them so much because also because it was read. They were playing with sound. Um, and it was also a completely different imagination.
Yeah.
So describing the different settings. And I think African storytelling is different in the sense that it tells story with meaning. So it's not just the story that's cute and sweet, but it's trying to tell you, it's trying to teach you a lesson, tell you something about life, about people, about, you know, just
Some
being.
kind of a moral,
So
yeah.
yeah, so it's a different model. And so I think that was quite empowering. And I think that is my earliest memory of feeling empowered by language.
Yeah, wow. Sure. It's great that you can even go back that far.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, no, it was really a beautiful, I think it just opened up my mind. So that's
yeah,
why I can remember it so vividly. Yeah.
that's true. Yeah. So for other aspiring writers who don't really know what it is they should write about or what they would be best at writing about, what advice do you have for them?
I think you should always read as much as possible.
Mhm.
So reading makes for a better writer because you see language, you read language, experience it by different authors in different ways. And I think you'll slowly start to feel where you fit in. Um, so whether you're a poet or whether you like plays or sometimes it can be all of them.
Mhm.
But one thing I do recommend for people who not quite sure how to start, is to start writing from what you know,
Mm.
because there's a level of authenticity that you want to bring through, and by that I mean authenticity in the point that you want to convey. So it doesn't have to be that, you, because you grew up in a village, so it has to be a village.
Mhm.
So not like that, but more in terms of what is your thinking and how do you want to convey it and what are you trying to say. And one important point is that people really should value their own experiences
True.
and not think that because you didn't have a certain exposure that it means you don't have an interesting story to tell, because everyone has an interesting story to tell.
I agree.
And what I always find interesting when people, like when I'm overseas, people are just so interested in South African stories, African stories. And I think there's part of us that does not believe that we have something important or interesting to say. So I would say, just say it, write
Yeah.
it.
Sure, that's some very good advice. Thank you so much, Palesa. I think I've been struggling a bit with finding my creative voice again. You know how we all have a certain kind of a writing style, and I feel like over time, or especially after becoming a mother, so much has changed, and so I'm struggling to find my writing style again. And I notice when I do write, it's changed a lot. And I think I'm just trying to ease into that new style. Do you have any advice for me?
Mm. It's actually, I think that will make you a better writer,
Hmm.
because your writing style, you can have a particular style, but even within that style, you can play with different voices, with different feelings. And the thing is not to shy away from it.
Hmm.
Try to be confident in that new voice and in exploring it, because I think sometimes you can get stuck in thinking, oh, but this is the style I like and I feel comfortable in. So it's also about opening yourself up to the challenge of finding a new voice.
I like that.
So one thing that I do with my writing a lot is, um, after I finished it, then I leave it for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I get back to it and I look at it, sometimes I really love it and I'll keep it, or I'll keep aspects of it. And then sometimes I feel, okay, it's nice, but it needs a change
Yeah.
because it wasn't quite what it could be. And so it's also about growth. So you growing intellectually, emotionally,
Yeah.
and growing as a writer, and knowing that you can grow. It's allowed, first of all. So you can go from what you did before, and then finding what it is, like again about energies. What was it? What kind of energy were you in at that particular space?
Yeah.
And then where are you now? And then try and work from that.
Thank you so much. That's some great advice. I think that's quite challenging as well. It's a great challenge to learn to trust yourself and to learn to trust in, in your abilities. Because I think that's also one of our biggest struggles as writers or as creatives. We don't necessarily trust. We always wait to hear what other people think about, what we've created. So yeah, thank you so much for that point. Okay, so do you view writing as a kind of spiritual experience or practice?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah.
Um, but again, maybe I should also set it in these two aspects, because you get commercial writing, pure commercial writing, and then more literary writing, and the one is not above the other. It's just different styles.
Sure.
But I think if you write commercially, then the format is almost set for you, that it has to be like this and that, and it's about chasing
Quite
numbers.
structured.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but I think if you write literary, it's more about your artistic value and contribution to this particular art form. And so it can be a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
I think for me it often is, um, because for me it then also becomes about elevating myself to a higher space,
Yeah.
and also thinking about what it is I want to say, what's the legacy I want to leave in terms of what I'm writing, and how it will impact and affect people who read it.
Very true. Very, very true. So when you think of writing, what's the one word that pops up in your mind? For me, it's release.
Hmm. For me, I would say transformation.
Beautiful. I just imagine.
Because it's also a transformative experience for you as a writer.
True.
Because it's like with I don't know if you've read any of Franz Kafka's work,
I haven't,
but
no.
there's one of his books called Metamorphosis, and it's about this man who who changes into a worm, and then he becomes a butterfly.
Okay.
So 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 it's a little bit like this, because you constantly, so you absorb stuff from the outside and you process it, and then it's a constant growth and renewal.
True.
So you start out as um, this insect, which then blossoms into a butterfly,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you go through that time and again, because you take something quite raw and you try and beautify it, and that's your contribution to the world.
I love that. And that sounds a lot like, as a writer, we take a lot from other writers, from our experiences in life, from, just different colors and textures that we experience in life. what was your biggest, or who or what was your biggest influencer when it comes to your writing style or just what you like to write about?
Hmm. Um, I love Toni Morrison and Nawal El-Zahedi, Egyptian writer.
Mm.
But that's a tough one. Because you see, I grew up in a reading home, so I've been devouring books from a young age. But I think, and then I love there's a Japanese writer as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I like writers I like maverick writers.
Maverick. What does that mean?
Maverick.
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 Yeah, so writers who are not. I like writing that's what's the word I'm looking for?
Mm-hmm.
I like writers who are not afraid to go beyond the everyday, what we see. So this Japanese writer, Murakami,
Mm-hmm.
what I love about his writing, he can write about something quite ordinary, but then he allows his characters to escape, into a whole new dimension.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So yeah, so I like the abstract in his stories. I like abstract art in general. So I also like writing that has an abstract feeling to it.
Mm.
So I think those are the writers that inspire me and that I'm influenced by. I also like psychology, so I also like writing that deals a lot with psychological aspects of being.
Yeah, things that get you to question and, really deep into certain topics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got a question from Fumani. Oh, no, sorry, from Miriam. She says, do your writings somewhere also reflect you from inside out?
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think what if you look at my writing, I think the common thread in it will be again the universality of the characters. So and I tend to write about characters that have very different living, cultural, and emotional experiences. So I think that's the aspect of me that is reflected in my writing.
So
So it's so perhaps it could be that you've got in the different characters you'll find maybe different pieces of me that I'm also exploring, as I go through life.
yeah, I like that a lot. So would you say your book on female genital mutilation, how would you kind of relate yourself to that book?
Mm-hmm. So that one, it's about a Somali woman who comes. So it's in South Africa, and she falls in love with a South African man, and then she's a model, so she's got quite a worldly experience as well. And so maybe like in a story like that, writing about love and relationships, it's about how do you navigate love across cultures, across
Yeah.
borders.
And
So
how,
I think,
uh-huh.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. And how did you go about writing that book? Did you have to do a lot of research? Do you have some friends who might have been in that situation?
So I did do a lot of research on that, and I think for me, with that story, I did a lot of because I was just interested in the experiences of these women who go through female genital mutilation, and I think part of what sparked it was talking to an Ethiopian friend, and he was talking about his relationship with an ex-wife, and we didn't talk about FGM in particular, but I was just thinking about what kind of experience did this woman have, and
Yeah.
how was she able to relate to this man who, if I were in that situation, I would be very angry towards all men.
Extremely.
After that. So it's like, how do you work around that? How do you reconcile that this is what's done to you because
Yeah.
of this patriarchal system, but yet you have to find it in yourself to still love these men who are part of the system that brutalize you in this way.
In the first place,
So
yeah.
yeah, those were the ideas and the thoughts that I was playing around with.
Thank you so much for that. And Fumani has a question. He says, how does one publish a book?
So there's several ways. Um, the the way we know mostly about is by getting a publisher. Now, the South African publishing environment is not as advanced as in the US or Europe. In the US and Europe, you need to get an agent. So you cannot approach a publisher directly. You go through an agent, and there's different agencies who specialize in different focus. So if you're more of a world writer, or if you write about very local things, so there are agents for each type of writing interest. So you would then go through an agent who will then approach different publishers. But now in South Africa, because we're small in terms of publishing, so in South Africa you would then go directly to a publisher, and you write a query letter, and just to say, look, this is my work, this is who I am, and this is what my writing is about. And usually they will ask for the first 2 or 3 chapters. So usually it's not more than 50 pages. So you write the query letter with the few chapters and send it to them and find out if they're interested in this kind of work. So it's always important to do research and find out what kind of publishing houses are there and what kind of books do they publish, so that you are not approaching a publisher who has no interest in your kind of material. So that's one way of going about it. Then there's always self-publishing, and there's benefits to it because you have more control in the process. But then you really have to be very careful about the editing process, because what tends to happen with self-publishing is that the actual editing is not as rigorous as it can be.
Sure.
And then also in terms of design, someone said to me that you can always tell a self-published book because the design, is just not appealing. And unfortunately, we do judge a book by its cover. So it's important to look into those aspects of design and as well. So you can self-publish, but then with self-publishing, you then need to have your own marketing and publicity platforms, because to get the book out there, to get it into stores, and to get it into people's hands, it's quite a process. So you need to spend a lot of money and time into thinking about how will you get your book out in the market. And then I think another way, I see a lot of people publishing online. There's some website where you can join other writers and sort of share your work and talk about it and start testing whether your work will be of interest to potential audiences.
And how does one find those platforms?
You just try and Google some, but I will also try to find some and send them to you to share with everyone.
All right, that's very great. Thank you so much for that, Palesa. Been really, really helpful. Yeah. I think you've given us so much information, especially when it comes to publishing. And so I've got just 3 more questions for you, and then we'll follow up to see if anyone else has some more questions before we wrap up. What's the first book that ever made you cry?
Oh my goodness. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Have you ever read My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
I know about it. I haven't. No. You know what? I would really have to think about this really deeply. I'm not sure. But when I remember, I'll let you know.
Thank you. Maybe we can even have a part 2 to this discussion and answer some questions that we'll get to. All right. So, does writing energize or exhaust you?
I think it energizes me.
It energizes you?
Because for me, it's because I oftentimes I sit with a story for a long time, and then when I start writing, then it's finally getting onto paper. It's a form of release.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think it's more energizing than exhausting.
And what are you with at the moment?
What am I?
What are you busy with at the moment? Are you busy writing anything at the moment?
Yeah, I'm going through my final edit of my novel. It's called At the Farther Side of the Rainbow. And I took the title from a poem by Nigerian author Ben Okri. The poem is called On a South African Street. So I took that's one of the lines and made it, because the poem is also quite relevant to the story itself. So I'm going through the final edit of that, and hopefully in December I'll just spend a lot of time just working on that.
We experienced some technical issues, and when we get back, you'll get to see Palesa chatting to Miriam, who is a Reiki healer, and she has a few questions for Palesa. I hope that you're able to catch them. Enjoy.
Yes. With different aspects of this person.
Yes.
But then the experiences of the characters were very different from what the real person's experience was.
That makes sense. But you see, that's easy in writing a book. But when you're writing an article on a subject, and then because you see how the biggest learning one gets is through personal experiences. So the essence is there. The essence is not about just writing on a topic. So the thing is that if I have to mention, for example, any XYZ, had I came across somebody who was depressed, and we were doing a therapy, and in that whole thing I learned a new aspect of recovery. So now I have to mention that situation, but at the same time I just do not want my client to feel uncomfortable with me, because my focus is on the experience rather than on the person. But obviously, if 5 6 people know that person and they're reading, they would be like, oh, so is she writing about you? And I don't want that to happen, because it's not about that particular one. It's about what I have picked up from that experience of, and there's thousands of clients we deal with. A lot of people have different experiences, and then it's not that only it's their experience. These things, depression could be for like 50,000 more people out there. But just to talk about that one certain thing is could be very important. So where do I draw the line where saying that, okay, I'm not going to particularly I don't want to point this person out, but then I want to also make it a little bit of um, sound that this was my learning with experience as well, that how can I relate this to a personal life, so it is very real, you know.
That's, you know, let me think about it a bit more, because that's a bit difficult when you're
Yeah,
doing a
it,
magazine
it is.
article.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So like if I'm writing my blog and if I'm catering to somebody with a certain amount, certain topic or certain problem like anxiety and stuff, and there's certain things where I found out, oh, I've recovered a new way of recovering fast than what is out there already. So then I have to come down to that particular experience. And there I don't want to invade anyone's privacy. So for me to, so just think about if it's just for that maybe 2 minute time span I have to explain my point and balance it well, because I really understand. It is so helpful that you say that how you take and break it into different characters rather than saying that, oh, this one person and whole life about it. So it takes the focus away from that one being to the topics that you're trying, or to the things you're trying to talk about. But for the blog writing, it would be like 5 different articles broken down. Then the time span is just going to go out because it's not a continuation.
Is there anything you'd like to say to Miriam, Palesa, before we wrap up?
So yeah, well, I have to think about that point and get back to her about it, because it's quite difficult, because you don't want to expose a person. But yeah, I need to think about how to do that in the context of writing for magazines.
And thank you so much for all your time. We know you're a very busy woman, and thank you for sharing all this insightful information. I think we all learned a lot. And yeah, guys.
Thanks for the invite. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam says thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you all.
Great, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's discussion, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you for joining F.L.O.'s discussion session. We look forward to any comments or suggestions you might have. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And don't forget, sharing brings healing.